very shortly. I will just pause if you're just joining us. Chris Daw here. We're just going to get rolling with the webinar in just a few seconds. We'll get others joined in and signed on for us. We'll get rolling with Canada in Motion, our December update, in just a few seconds. Okay, well, it looks like we've got most of the folks that are planning to sign on that are signing in here for us. Good morning, everyone. It's Chris Daw. I'm the chair of your Canadian Campus Rec Association, and also on the line here with me, we've got Kathleen Hatch, who's our advocate, our consultant that's been working with us on this Canada in Motion project. Good morning, Kathleen.
Good morning, Chris.
And of course, we've got our support from NERSA headquarters, Emily and Christine as well. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Excellent. And we've got a good selection of folks from across the country joining us this morning, so welcome to all of you, and thanks for taking some time on this Friday. Hope you're all staying warm. It sounds like, you know, Kathleen is in Victoria today, and they've got snow there, so it sounds like we got snow from coast to coast, and there's a pretty good selection of cold across the country, so hopefully you're staying warm and going to have an enjoyable winter weekend here. Again, thanks for joining us. We're going to just take a few minutes to give you some updates on where we're at with our Canada in Motion project, and certainly have the opportunity for any of you to provide us feedback or ask any questions that you have at this point in time. Just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded, so we will share that. And as we go through the PowerPoint here that you're seeing on your screen, we'll be sharing that PowerPoint, and there'll be a few links in there to get at some more of the details in behind this as we go. So we'll jump into it, and our agenda this morning that hopefully you saw actually very similar to what was sent in the email invite. So we're going to run through just some updates, talk about the final report, the bylaw vote that's coming up, the NERSA annual conference, really what's next, and then opportunity for questions and feedback. If you have any questions or feedback or any issues with hearing us or seeing us or anything like that, please do type it in to the webinar chat function there, and Emily and Christine will pass those along to us, and if there's anything we need to address along the way, by all means, you can stop us or we'll jump into that, but certainly at the end we'll have time for questions and feedback as well. All right, so hopefully you've seen this one before. This one hasn't been updated since our October webinar. It will be updated as we head into the next phase, but right now this is continuing plan and the continuing representation of all of the work of the Canada in Motion. So I'm not going to go through it in any detail. You've heard that before. If you have any questions, by all means, fire those our way. The next slide here, again, this one was on the October webinar as well. Our tenants of a Canadian region of NERSA, and this was approved by the NERSA Board of Directors back in October at the Leadership Summit, and their, I guess, mid-year meetings, and this is really what we're working from, and it's a strong foundational piece that will help us guide all of our work and guide the work of NERSA, and there will be some examples of that as we go through the webinar here this morning of how that's starting to play out. So an update from your Canadian leadership team, just giving you a hit of a few different things that are going on across our association. So certainly since October and the Western Canada Campus Rec Conference in Victoria, and where we had the Leadership Summit, we've taken a bunch of that information from both the conference and the Leadership Summit and been compiling all that information and incorporating it into the final report for Canada in Motion. And so when we say final report, it's really the final report about wrapping up phase one. So phase one really started in earnest last May, And again, a huge thank you to Precor, who has been our sponsor of this phase of the project, and of course has helped us to have Kathleen on board and doing a huge chunk of the work here, and a huge thank you to Kathleen. So that's the phase 1 piece of work, so we're getting close to wrapping that up here in December as planned. The phase 2 we'll talk about a little bit more further on in the webinar here, but that's really this next section, or the time period anyways, between January and the end of April. And again, we'll talk about that work in a little bit. Our Canadian, our CCRA/Canadian Region Leadership Planning. So this was a big topic of conversation this week on our Canadian Leadership Team call. We are talking about normally or I guess the last couple of years at least, with our Canadian Campus Rec Association, we would be entering into a period of elections. So as it's set up now, we've got the provincial directors, and then my role as the chair and the secretary role, and then we've got all of the student leaders in each of the provinces as well. And all the student leaders are on 1-year terms, and then the rest of the position are 2-year terms, and they're overlapping, so that some would be coming up normally in this year, and you can access any of that, and we'll make sure that we put the link as well in here so that you can access that leadership team, and the terms are all spelled out there. But what we wanted to let you know is that we actually aren't entering into what we've done in the last couple of years at this time. And that's really because of all of this work of Canada in Motion, of the Canadian region work within NERSA, and certainly are anticipating becoming a Canadian region of NERSA. And within that, that would mean that the leadership would change. And so we're having some real discussions right now. There's a plan, within the NERSA member network, where assuming Canada becomes a region, that we would have representation there, and that in all the other regions is a regional representative and a regional student leader. And so we need to be able to look at how that connects into the NERSA framework and the NERSA member network, but we also are having those conversations about this region will be a little bit different, and especially a little bit different up front. So it's getting the foundation and built, and there's still a lot of development work to be done within this region. The fact that it is a different country, which means, and we've talked before about lots of the different stakeholders and connections that are specifically Canadian, so there's a bunch more work that might not be the same as the kind of work that would be done in one of the other regions, just simply because of that nature of a different country. And so we're talking about what does the leadership actually need to be. So it might look a little bit different than some of the other regions, and fit for purpose. And so that's a piece of important work that's going on right now. And so if any of you have any feedback to that, we'd love to hear that. But otherwise, stay tuned. We'll be communicating out very soon what that's going to look like. Obviously, the vote and the officially becoming a region of NERSA will have an influence. If it goes through or it doesn't go through, there would be a different outcome, but we're certainly anticipating it going through and planning for that eventuality, and that our leadership structure needs to be for the new Canadian region, and that work would be done following the vote and following the new Canadian region being formed, and the official launch of the new Canadian region, which is slated for May 1. So then you can anticipate that there would actually be a call out for those positions, those leadership positions. There'd be a plan that comes with that, and then there would be the opportunity for any and all of you to jump into those leadership roles, and then obviously everyone having the opportunity to elect those leaders. So stay tuned for that work that is underway right now, and will be communicated out soon. Then the next bullet there, planning for the Nurse Annual Conference, and we'll come to another slide on that in just a few moments. But certainly lots of work towards that here coming up very soon at the end of February. And then the next bullet there about the other Canadian region or CCRA events. So again, we're actually talking through right now the naming and the language and how that works, because obviously we're used to, in the last number of years, a Western Canada Campus Rec Conference and an Eastern Canada Campus Rec Conference, and then there's been some Atlantic meetings as well. So those would be the three primary that we're talking about, but looking at those as you know, full CCRA events or Canadian region events, assuming that that moves forward. And then a lot of stakeholder connection stuff. So one example is that Peter Mumford, who's the Ontario Provincial Director, and myself have been invited to present to an organization called CUPICA. So you may be familiar with that. It's the deans of phys ed and kinesiology across the country at all the different universities. And they have their meetings in Toronto next week. And so we've been asked to do a presentation on our Canada in Motion work. And as one of our key stakeholders, we want to engage them in this dialogue, and certainly hopefully have a number of them, and especially the ones that do have Campus Rec within their portfolio, although all of them would be connected to this work on the various campuses. But those that have it in their portfolio, we're certainly hoping to get to the Nurse Annual Conference, along with some folks who have athletics and rec responsibilities, along with our student services folks, all of those different stakeholders. So we're continuing to have those conversations as we work towards the Nurse Annual Conference. I'm going to pass it over to Kathleen, who, of course, she gets a ton of the credit for authoring our Canada in Motion report. And Kathleen, if you want to give us a little bit of an update on where that is at right now.
You bet. Hey, and listen, thanks, Chris. And really, I want to give a big kudos out to, well, certainly everybody who was at the Leadership Summit, but really colleagues across the country who took time to look at a fairly lengthy interim report in October. And after, some really good feedback that helped us, reframe historical roots, all the way out to adding texture and helping, the value proposition of campus recreation really come alive. We wanted to make sure that we did sum up this first phase in a report that can stand as a record of this moment, but as a look back, but also as a scan of what is the unique aspects of Canada, both from kind of country and culture and post-secondary, but really then diving into the significant relationships. Chris was just talking about the deans in CUPICA, and clearly our colleagues in athletics and student services and health and wellness really round out often the internal. But what is also such a strength of the Canadian fabric is the relationships in community and externally. And so all of those are certainly a part of this final report. But we also wanted to have it timely in terms of, as what's certainly been new work since October, including some of the work that's looking towards the conference, and we're going to highlight some of that in a moment, and these emerging relationships. We also use this as a starting point to talk about transition planning, the work ahead. Chris is right that I think we're keenly aware that the vote will be in January and the corresponding actions after. But I think we've had an eye on, the fact that we need to be ultimately very ready for Canada to be poised to move into this next chapter and all that those new opportunities mean. And so this report is very lengthy, and it has been accepted. We had a chance to interact with the NERSA Board of Directors, and they have appreciated this work. And after this webinar today, as materials are shared, we will give you a link to this report, and know that, you know, clearly there's a ton of things that are mentioned in sort of the next two phases, and those are meant really to still be a starting point. So both what will happen and the timeline, you know, is certainly in full partnership with the NERSA headquarters and team, and just the realistic resources that can be brought to bear in the next, you know, year to two. So you will have this available to you, and if there's any additional feedback, we welcome it. But really use it as a placeholder for the things that should be coming in the future that we're very excited about.
Great, thanks Kathleen. And so jumping next to the NERSA bylaw vote, so we've referred to that a couple of times already, and hopefully you're already aware of this. There was some information that came out from NERSA in October, and we passed that information along to all the CCRA members, and that's the link that I'm pointing to here, but will be shared certainly again when this webinar comes out, the recording and the PowerPoint itself, and you'll be able to click through onto that, but you can find it on the NERSA website, the information that was passed out in October. But there will actually be some new information coming out next week from NERSA, and again we'll make sure that all CCRA members see that, and that is the launch of elections, so that's scheduled for January 18th, and as the next bullet says, all NERSA members have a vote, and what's in that bylaw vote, you may recall we've talked about this one before, but just a reminder that it isn't specifically about forming a Canadian region. The bylaw vote is really about removing the regions or the naming of the regions and the compilation of the regions from the bylaws and putting that into policy so that then the board can be a little bit more nimble and move the regions as needed. And the other thing that the board was able to act on at their meeting this week was that to finalize the bylaws that will be coming for vote, and then to act on those policies so that should the bylaw vote pass in January, that they can take that next action and be able to create the new Canadian region based on that. So that's the work that's going on behind the scenes there, and there'll be some more information coming out on that next week from NERSA, and again, like I say, we'll pass that along to all members, and then if you have any other, again, questions or feedback on that, I guess the reminder here is that all NERSA members have a vote on the bylaw. So if you're not currently a NERSA member, or some of your staff are currently not a NERSA member, you would have the opportunity to vote in both the elections and for the bylaw as long as you become a NERSA member prior to the start of those being open. So being a NERSA member prior to January 18th is an important milestone there. And then February in DC, Washington DC, or very close to it, National Harbor, Maryland. And so we really are looking at this as a historic moment. You know, we're doing some really cool research at the moment, and got some help from one of my student staff who's pulling together a bit of a timeline of the relationship of Canada and NERSA. And it really dates back into the 70s and the early days of NERSA, really, that Canada has been involved in various ways, and we've had a number of leaders along the way. And we're going to get an opportunity, hopefully, to celebrate the culmination, or at least this phase, of the work and relationship between Canada and NERSA, but really, hopefully, a formalizing of that relationship in a lot of ways. And we're going to be able to do that at the NERSA Annual Conference this year. as you see there, February 21st to 24th, and we certainly hope that you are going to be able to join 3,000 or so folks, our family as we often call it. But it really is an amazing event. If you haven't had the opportunity to go before or for a while, it's an amazing event in terms of professional development, in terms of the network, so certainly the much larger network of all of NERSA, but even within that, then the Canadian network. And I think we've done a really good job over the last number of years of actually making sure that we connect the Canadians at the NERSA conference, and so we'll work hard to make sure that that can be leveraged again, and that we've got the opportunity to not only learn some things, but connect and build our network, and then, you know, don't forget the actual the expo itself, where you can certainly get connected to a lot of our vendors, sponsors, partners, those folks that help us do our business, and it's certainly one of the premier places to do that. So all that is reason in itself, but there's some other pretty cool things on the go here right now too. We've been able to work with our NERSA colleagues, and they're offering a 35% discount for Canadians who haven't been in the last couple of years, and so that's a great incentive to get a few new folks there that haven't maybe been able to join us in the last while. We're pushing towards this being one of the largest attended events ever for Canadians, to be able to participate in this historic event. And there's also within that, there's a specific Canadian form, and there's Canadian funds, and and again, I'll put the links on here, but if you can look back through our communications, our CCRA communications, there's the archive there. In there we've got all of that information in one email, and I'll make sure again we point back to that one email where you can get access to the form and the discount code and all that kind of stuff. And then the next thing that we've really been working hard on here, and big thank you again to our NERSA headquarters colleagues who have helped us carve out what we're calling Canada Day. And so I'll flip to the next slide here. I know it's a bit small probably on your screen, but again, this will be linked and you'll be able to look at more of the details here. This is still a bit of a work in progress, but it's pretty darn close to a final draft, and we'll be sharing this widely. As it says at the beginning there, we're talking about Thursday, February 23rd. So as part of the conference itself, just carving out some time that we're really focused on some Canadian initiatives and some Canadian discussions. Now, we're doing that within the framework of the conference. So, for instance, that first educational session from 8 to 9:30 is at the same time as a whole slate of other educational sessions as part of the regular conference, and as are the other educational session times that are listed there. And what we've tried to make sure we're doing here is that, yes, there's a really good Canadian component to this conversation, but that it actually has wider appeal than that. So we expect many of our American colleagues will want to be a part of some of these educational sessions as well, and they'll certainly be welcome to do that. Wanted to highlight really that first educational session on there, about the Okanagan Charter, and hopefully you've seen us refer to that a number of times, but the conversation here is really picking up some cool momentum, and I think that's you know, good work from a whole bunch of folks, but we've got some really cool colleagues in the wellness component on many of our campuses. You may have seen a press release not too long ago where 6 universities across the country have actually had their presidents sign on to the Okanagan Charter, so sort of an official little ceremony at the president's meeting. And we certainly think that that's a great initiative, and we're working with our colleagues at those 6 universities to be a part of this session, where we're going to have the campus rec folks and the wellness folks in the discussion and talking about how does campus rec play a role, and maybe even lead a little bit in how we can make sure all of our universities are a whole lot healthier. And we believe that Campus Rec needs to play a critical role in that. So that's what that conversation's about. The next one about all of the partnerships and collaborations and making sure that we do optimize how we're working together with our colleagues and partners on our campuses. Then we've got the Canada in Motion Leadership Summit 2.0. So this is kind of following up from the leadership summit that we had in Victoria, and putting together, some of the same people will be in that room, and then we're hoping to get a whole lot of new folks in that room. And certainly being on the opposite side of the continent, we expect we should get some folks from Eastern Canada and the Maritimes and Central Canada, and hope to get a number of folks involved there. And that's including all of our partners. Those in recreation, of course, leaders in recreation across the country will be there, leaders in athletics and recreation, leaders in student services, leaders in the academic portion, so some of those CUPICA colleagues that I was referring to earlier. We hope to have all of those folks in the room for some really significant discussion about where we've come so far in this and all the work yet to be done, and trying to put some real priority to that work, engage a number of folks in how they can help move that work forward. So that's really what that middle of the day will be about. Then we've got another educational session put in there. We've got the hopefully will be the first member network connection. So as some of you might be familiar with, they used to be called business meetings for each region. So we're anticipating at this point that we would have a new Canadian region and our very first member network connection, our first official meeting, if you will. And really that's to talk about all of the stuff that's got to happen around the business of our new region over the next year or so. And then of course we've got to celebrate. And so we want to wrap up the day with a significant celebration of the work that's been done, hopefully celebrating our new region, hopefully being able to welcome a whole bunch of folks into that celebration all the way back from those 1970s and the early days of the Canada-NERSA relationship, be able to celebrate some of those milestones along the way. And we look forward to having a little bit of fun together, as we always do. So looking forward to that piece. I'm going to turn it back to Kathleen now to talk a little bit more. We've touched on a couple of things in phases 2 and phase 3, but Kathleen, you want to take us a little deeper?
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris. And obviously those were some cool highlights, and clearly the culmination in DC and with a Canada Day, is a big chunk of the focus in this next phase. And these phases, really refer to, Chris has got here on this slide, the January to April, and phase 3 is, beyond, and sort of that sense of in the first region. And, like I shared earlier, for those of you who are interested, you can see a long list in a link to the report. But again, remember that this is the starting point. And as much as we have sort of outlined as some possibilities and strong suggestions in areas, it will take your voice. And so when we think about this, this ongoing outreach, but really it's the engagement and the activity of leaders in Canada, thinking back to one of the tenants, Canada leading Canada. So this is the moment to dive in, because you may see something on one of these phases, or you may think of something that frankly needs to be talked about that hasn't been identified yet, and you may help bring some expertise. I'll give you a couple of examples. Like in the future, we need a research agenda in Canada. And there's some in Canada that have not just topical expertise, but expertise in that area. And think about data in ways that other colleagues don't. And so you may be able to lean in on just a variety of topics. Some of these you know, Chris was talking about the Okanagan Charter. I mean, clearly, you know, that we need individuals to join some of those conversations, and there is a planning group that is coming together, a new network that will talk about those. So as you think about your own gifts and talents and treasures to sort of share with your colleagues, but to help this Canadian home have texture, and some of the opportunities can be small and be, you know, fit in everything else that you may have on your plate right now. And some of them may be significant roles that you may be able to carve out, you know, and it may not be this year, but it may be in the next couple of years. So as you continue to sort of find ways to, you know, participate, we've also got listed on this slide some of the upcoming events that are, you know, clearly already confirmed in terms of dates, which is really cool to see. You know, again, the advancement here of this, you know, the paradigm before of a West and a Eastern meetings, now just thinking of events in Canada, and Windsor being a host to one in June, knowing that there was some great synergies in Nova Scotia last July, early August, that I had the chance to meet with several colleagues out there. I know that there's real interest to have something again this summer, and that just this week Tanya and her group at the University of Manitoba have agreed to host an event in November. So really some spectacular things, and now's the time to sort of say, you know, to find your path in and contribute. Back to you, Chris.
Great, thanks, Kathleen. Well, really, it's actually over to the rest of you right now. That's really what we had to share for today. So if you have any questions, any feedback, any other comments that you'd like to share at this point in time, just type them into your search box there. Emily, or sorry, the discussion box there. Emily, do we have anything in there at this point?
We don't right now, Chris, but I'm watching it, so just type in your questions and I'll let Chris know.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, as Kathleen said, I mean, this continues to not be held in any one small area. We may be doing some speaking today and doing some of the work behind the scenes, but we need a whole bunch of you. And there certainly has been some great engagement at the Leadership Summit, some feedback on the interim report, as Kathleen said. So thank you for all of you for that engagement, and then thank you for what you're going to do in the future, because we do need you in so many ways as we continue this important work that's going to help all of us. So let me pause again there. And Emily, any questions or comments yet?
It looks like you covered everything really well, Chris. There's no questions.
All right. Well, we'll thank you for that optimism. We'll keep it there for right now. That yeah, hopefully we have covered what you needed to hear today. But by all means, if there's something else that you didn't want to raise during the webinar here, but you've got comments, questions, I'll come back to this one in just a moment, but that my contact information is here, so make sure that you are sending those things along. But to this last slide that I wanted to is really about, again, how are we asking you to engage? Your Canadian leadership team needs you to be doing a number of things. One being advocate. Advocate on your campus to those colleagues, to your student staff, to your stakeholders in those different groups on your campus. We know that there's lots of work to be done right there, and that you can have a huge influence just in the work that you're going to do on your campus. But then think about how can you advocate a little bit beyond that. How can you connect some of the dots perhaps within your area, your province, and then across the country. How can you help connect dots to someone that you have a relationship with that we may not have yet, and then connect those into your Canadian leadership team as well. Certainly we talked about joining the celebration in BC, and we want you there, and we want you to be bringing a whole bunch of folks with you. So again, there's an advocacy role to encourage as many people as possible. Like I said, we want this to be the largest ever gathering of Canadians, and we want to have a lot of fun and do a lot of really good work together. So look forward to seeing you in DC. The be a member certainly of the Canadian Campus Rec Association, but we also want that next step, because if you're a member of NERSA, you get an opportunity to vote and help move the bylaw piece forward, and then be voting in terms of leadership moving forward, and be engaged in all this work. Vote, the next word on that slide, and we want you to certainly be voting in the bylaw vote, but then thinking about that transition to the next leadership or the hopefully new Canadian region, that we want to make sure that you're voting there and contributing to shaping our leadership for this next phase of work. And then we want you to consider leading. There's lots of opportunity, and it could be, as a member of the Canadian leadership team, if that's what we're going to call it at that point in time, but those that are leading our new Canadian region, we would love to see you there. But even if it's in another role, as Kathleen referred to, if it's connecting into one of those key pieces of work like the Okanagan Charter, or like assessment, or like working with our sponsors and partners, some of those work teams that we have going now, we've got room for you to come and lead and be a part and share your expertise at whatever level you possibly can. So please do consider being a part of things moving forward. And I'll check back in. Emily, any other questions or comments that came in?
Yeah, it was just asked if you could explain a little bit more about how the NERSA bylaws change will lead to a Canadian region.
Sure, and others can feel free to jump in on this a little bit too, but so really the idea is that within the NERSA bylaws right now, it states exactly which provinces and which states are part of the 6 current regions of NERSA. So the idea of the bylaw vote is to take that portion out of the bylaws, and so that it's not specified exactly which regions exist and who's in which region, and put that into a more flexible place, and that's with the NERSA board. That the work that would be done as we've done in this case, both in Canada and with the NERSA task force, to advocate for a new region, to advocate for a new alignment. And then if it's not ingrained in the bylaws, it doesn't have to go in front of the full NERSA membership. The full NERSA membership, many of whom might not have any perspective or any I guess interest in what's happening in some other area of the region or of the association. And so the idea is for that to be more flexible, more nimble, and that the people who are involved are the people who are having a say and influencing where that moves to. So in this case, the vote would be to take the regions out of the bylaws and then allow essentially the board to act, and the board has already prepared for that with the work of our Canada in Motion project and as well as the NERSA region task force. All of the work has essentially been done that then they could take action and create this Canadian region very shortly after that bylaw vote. So I hope that answers the question. Anybody want to add anything else, Christine?
Yeah, let me just add, this is Kathleen, and I think the really cool thing that's taking place right now, really concurrently, this effort to clean up and really almost, have more mature bylaws for an association, and simultaneously, recognize that Canada has already gone through a lengthy review and process. But then, so on the heels of the successful bylaw vote, the board has already seen enough evidence and work for the Canada region to be established and agreed that that would be a good outcome. But it then provides, the platform going forward for any review, any process, to review regional alignment. So it's, a very forward-looking way without making this just specifically about Canada. And yet also not hiding that this is clearly an outcome that will benefit and shape a Canadian region.
Yeah, and this is Christine. I'll jump in a little bit too. Just I think you touched on this a little bit, Kathleen, but the board has worked rigorously on putting together a policy so that there is procedures in place for any requests that may come in for either a state or a province down the road or a country, as with Canada, to change or create a new region. So that work has been influenced, of course, by some of the work that's going on in Canada, as well as several task forces that have taken a hard look at this and taken information back to the board and had lots of discussions with the board. So it's been well vetted throughout the years and been years in the making. Those documents are available on the NERSA website and were just updated and finalized by the board this last week. So they will be part of that communication that Chris mentioned is coming out next week in preparation for elections. I also wanted to let the group know that the board is going to host a Q&A session, a virtual Q&A session in early January. The details of that are being finalized right now, but we will definitely get that information out to everyone if people have further questions about the bylaws change or even in regards to this new policy and ideas on how it will work. So that will be sometime, that first or second week of January prior to elections launching, and give members an opportunity to ask these type of questions and get additional answers directly from the board of directors.
Right. Thank you, Christine and Kathleen, for filling in the gaps there. That's perfect. Hopefully we have answered that question. If there's anything else, Emily, do we get anything else there for questions?
Nope, we're good, Chris.
Okay. Excellent. Well, as this slide says, there's, I guess, a couple things on here. Thank you all for being a part of helping build our home, and look forward to working with all of you more in the future. Thank you to Precor again for their support of this important work that we are doing. They have certainly helped a lot and been a great partner in this. And if you get the opportunity to thank them, please do that. A huge thank you to Kathleen, who has done an amazing amount of work over these last 8 months or so, specifically on this project, and has been a huge help to me and to our Canadian leadership team, and certainly to all of us as we've moved this Canada in Motion forward. So very grateful for her work and her expertise and certainly leadership in this. And last but not least on that slide is happy holidays. I hope that all of you, whatever you're celebrating this month and these next few weeks, that you are able to enjoy some downtime, some R&R, some wellness time, and some family time, and certainly hope that everyone stays happy and healthy during this time period, and we will talk to you again soon, very, very soon in 2017. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.